Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another YouTube video. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you the full creation of an envelope from beginning to end. And I'm also going to be sharing with you some tips for using a white gel pen. I get a lot of comments about how do you make your gel pen work so well? And I'm going to be showing you how in real time. And then I'm going to show you how to protect your watercolor envelope when it goes through the mail. A lot of people are concerned about moisture damage or anything like that as it is being delivered to the recipient. So I'm going to address a little bit of that as well. Starting out with the 123 punch board from We Are Memory Keepers. And as was shown on screen, it advises me for a 5x7 card to cut my watercolor paper or whatever surface you're using to 9 7/8 by 9 7/8 and then slide it into the envelope maker or the 123 punch board at 4 1/8. I'm using my bone folder that comes with the punch board, and I'm scoring the bottom square line. I think that's envelope A line. And then I'll rotate, and I did punch there too. I'm going to line up that scored line that I just did. It falls into a groove that's on the left-hand side of the board. Punch, and then score that same line again. So I'm going to repeat those steps, rotating my paper until I have 4 sides for an envelope. So once again, the tip for this when you're using a punch board like this is you want to line up that score line on the left with the groove that's on the left. Or you could also line up that score line with the far left little nubby coming off of the punch. That's another great way to make sure you get it inlined perfectly. After I punched the 4 corners and scored the 4 lines, I now have my basic envelope. I'm going to be creating and decorating my envelope before I adhere it close. It's a little bit easier to work with when it's completely flat. So I'm just folding these over so I can see the edges really well before taking the envelope and putting it on a hard board and taping it down. When I'm going to be watercoloring on an envelope and I want to protect the flaps, I use a little bit of scratch paper. This is actually cardstock that I had other things written on the other side that I was going to be throwing away. So I just turned them over, taped them down to my envelope, and now I'm ready to start painting. I'm using some Altenew Artist watercolors. Has some great colors in that palette. I'm going to only be using 3 different colors. This first one is a nice green. Unfortunately, I do not recall the name of the color, but I'm going to be painting in layers. I just want really organic sort of stripes going across and then deepening that color. It's very similar to what I do with my faux dip dye watercolor technique, but this time I'm not taking that color all the way to the bottom. I decided to not do that mostly because this watercolor paper that I'm using today is actually only 90 pound. It's not very thick, so it can't accommodate as much paint as I normally would use when doing that faux dip dye technique. And if you would like to check out a video showing you the full dip dye watercolor technique, I'll have that up in the little eye icon in the top right corner of the video. You can click on that and then go to that video and see a little bit more about the faux dip dye technique, which is one of my most favorites watercolor techniques. It's very simple to do and it's an awesome look when it's finished. I've moved on to a dark blue color, which in order to increase the intensity and the saturation on my envelope, I'm going to be layering that quite a bit on top. I'm going to be working on this blue for quite a while, trying to bring it down to the bottom. And then I'm eventually going to add some black. And the black is really going to intensify everything at the very bottom of the envelope. It's not really going to look like black because it is sitting on top of that blue that I've already painted. And it's just going to give it a darker shade. Also, as I paint over top of this, the color underneath pulls up a little bit because I'm putting a wet brush on top of it. And watercolor, as we know, is reactive with water even after it's dry. So I'm just trying to put a really saturated amount of color on top so that as I pull up some of the color underneath, it's not pulling up too much. I moved on to that black shade, just intensifying the color at the bottom. And to me, this almost looks like water. It looks like maybe under the depths of the sea or something like that. I think it would look different if I had picked different colors, maybe pinks to purples. I think it would look very different. And that's another great option. I think I might have to do an envelope like that soon. I removed my tape and my protective pieces that were saving the side flaps from being watercolored. And then I moved to my MISTI stamp positioning tool. I'm using the Floral Alphabet stamp set from Altenew, and I'm going to put the recipient's name in these stamps. I'm going to be heat embossing them, so I'm prepping them with an anti-static powder tool. This just preps the surface of the paper. And then I'm using some Versamark ink. What I mean by prepping the paper is that when you're using embossing powder, if there's any static cling or static electricity or any moisture at all on your surface, the embossing powder will stick to it. So it will stick to areas where you don't want it. So when you prep the surface, that means you're adding a little bit of powder to that surface, cuts down on static electricity, and dries any areas that might have any remaining moisture. So I'm applying some Alabaster embossing powder right on top, just sprinkling it on and tapping off the excess, wiping away any areas where powder kind of stuck around. And then I used my heat tool to heat set this, and the heat melts the embossing powder and makes it smooth and shiny. All right, so here's where I get into the white gel pen tips. My favorite gel pen is a Sakura Jelly Roll number 10, and it's specifically the number 10 because I find that the smaller line widths don't perform quite as well. I think having a kind of a larger tip on the pen allows more ink to come through. It keeps the flow going nicely. So I think investing in the number 10 is a really good choice. I do know that they have an option to buy a set of 3 pens, and I think it has the 5, 8, and 10. And you might find yourself liking the other widths more than the 10. For me personally, I like the number 10 bold. So I wanted to include this bit of writing in the street address with this gel pen because I want you to note how slowly I write these letters. I think a lot of time when I hear from people that say, my gel pen just doesn't work. It keeps skipping. It's drying out. I can't get it to work. I think sometimes, or maybe a lot of the times, I would maybe say 80 to 90% of the time, the reason why your gel pen is skipping is because you're writing too quickly or you have too much pressure pressing the pen onto the paper. I actually have a fairly light touch with this. I have to think about how the pen is made, where it has a very sharp metal tip, and at that tip it has a metal ball. That's how gel pens work. And as the gel ink comes out of the pen, it coats that little tiny ball on the tip of the pen. And as you kind of glide that pen across your surface of your project, the ball kind of catches on the surface of your paper and it rolls that ball and recoats it with that ink. And then in turn, that ink is transferred to your paper. So if you're pressing too hard on the ball, if you're pressing too hard on your paper with your pen, that ball can't really move or it can't rotate as easily to coat itself with that ink. So think about that as you're writing. You've got to slow down enough that that ball can kind of move around and get coated with ink. This is how I understand it anyway. I could be completely wrong. It could be that there's no ball at the end and that nothing rotates, but that's sort of what I've observed when I've looked at pens that I think are dried up, and I look at the tip and I see that there's a ball there and I kind of move it around and it recoats in the ink. So I think this is correct. So make sure you have a light hand, go slow, and sometimes it helps to kind of scribble on your hand or something warm. My friend Kathy Rakusin has that tip that, when she shares how she adds white details to her coloring projects, she likes to scribble on her hand, and that kind of warms up the tip of the brush or the tip of the pen. So here's the normal speed that I would be writing at. And you can see that it's picked up the clip a little bit. It's a little bit more of a faster pace. This is just a regular black gel pen. Unfortunately, this pen is not sold anymore, but it is a Boulder Black waterproof pen. And it's what I use on a lot of envelopes because it's waterproof. So it's really great. I don't have to worry about any moisture altering the writing once I have it on the paper and it's dry. So, by the way, I want to mention that Kim's address is used with permission. She submitted her address using my mail art submission form. If you would like to submit your address for consideration for future mail art videos, please check out the link down below in the video description or at my blog. You can submit your address, and that form is actually a new form every single month. I throw out the addresses from the previous month and start new every month because I want to make sure those addresses are current. Even though sometimes I do these envelopes and I don't mail them for a few weeks, I want them to be as current as possible. So after I had my envelope pretty much all done except for the postage, I'm going to assemble the envelope. I'm using some dry tape adhesive, and this is Express-It tape. Anything that's super sticky, like a score tape or red line tape, something like that is going to be great on your envelope. Some people even like to use a strong glue just to reinforce everything. I like to put these envelopes together with this tape and then use some fun decorative washi tape to close it once I have my card inside. So I put the adhesive on the flaps, or just on the bottom flap, folded it up, and now I basically have my envelope. I've picked out some postage. I've got one Forever stamp that I'm applying right now. Some nice blue flowers on that. I think it would go well with the color scheme. Then I have a 34-cent blue hummingbird. And then I've got 2 more vintage stamps that I've moistened the back of these stamps with a wet paper towel and then pressed them onto my envelope. So if you want to protect your envelope from any water damage or moisture, I recommend using some Tim Holtz Distress Micro Glaze. This is a great kind of product, and it's a little bit different, so I'm going to explain how you use it. It's the consistency of a lip balm, kind of a little bit of a softer lip balm, and you can apply it with your fingertips. That's how I did it for a long time. And then someone here in the comments at YouTube said, hey, you can use the mini round blending tool and it fits inside that jar perfectly. So I've been doing that since I don't like to get my hands all dirty and messy. But you could definitely use your fingertips, and basically you just want to apply a thin coat of the Distress Micro Glaze over the entire envelope, except for the postage stamps. Notice how I am avoiding the postage stamps. That's because everywhere where you apply this, it will add kind of a slick surface that will repel water and any sort of ink that's put on top. So the post office would have a terrible time trying to cancel out those stamps if it had this coating on it. So just avoid the stamps and you'll be okay. After you've applied the microglaze, you then take a paper towel and buff that in and take away any of the excess. And we have our finished envelope. Now that microglaze will dry back and it won't have such a shiny surface. And after it's completely dried, that's when I'll drop it in the mail. So thanks so much for joining me today for this envelope. I love this watercolor technique. It's super easy and simple, but yet dramatic and really packs a punch. Once again, if you'd like to add your address to consideration for mail art, check out that link down below. And I'll be back soon with another card video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.